Hi there and welcome back to Tacks, our video series on taking your biggest questions about moving from ideas to action. I'm Nicola, founder of Up With Community, a practice for getting in touch with our personal power for change. Today I am very excited to be sitting here with Mr. Devon Hall, Executive Director of Rural Empowerment Association for Community Help, a really powerful organization in Duplin County that is focused on community empowerment and helping the health and livelihood of generations to come. So I wanted to sit down with you because every time that we meet up in meetings, you teach me something new about the work, and I learn something new about the work just through our conversations and hearing stories, and I really wanted to share some of that with other folks. I'm really inspired by the work that y'all are doing, and why don't we just start with telling folks a little bit more about what you're up to in the world?
When you mentioned learning, again, my name is Devon Hall, and I'm co-founder, actually, also of we call REACH. And REACH was founded in 2002 to address economic, social, and environmental needs and issues in and around Duplin County. Duplin County, North Carolina, being known as hog capital of the world. The problem also that we face is it's power structure and racism in ways that people wouldn't really believe in the 21st century. And one reason why I do what I do is because I was born and raised here in Duplin County, and I've traveled a little bit across the world, and to me, there's no place like Duplin County. That's home. I have 5 adult children and 6 siblings. All that live in Duplin County now. So I have no desire to live anyplace else. And with that being said, I want Duplin County to be the best place in the world, for anyone, especially my children and grandchildren. I grew up hunting and fishing, as a young boy in Duplin County. And I remember the first sign of anything about the environment that struck me that I couldn't answer. I remember one of my favorite fishing holes, I got off from work 8 o'clock one morning and ran home. I got home and grabbed my tackle, went down to the river and began to fish and began to catch fish, and had sores and boils on them. I'd never seen anything like that before. Of course, I didn't keep the fish, I threw them back, but I was aware that there was a confined feeding operation, CAFO as we call it, swine CAFO, uphill from where I was fishing. But at that time, this was probably in the early 90s, 93, 94. I didn't put it together. I just couldn't put 2 and 2 together. But again, when I met Dr. Steve Wing in 2004, some of the questions, being answered. We received some funding from US EPA, a small grant, just to do a listening type project, to try to find some of the answers to some of the questions, and wanted to look out among the community and find out, if they had any questions, concerns. And we found that it's amazing that sometimes you can live in an area and there's concerns that people have the next little community over, and they don't talk about it except for within the community they live in. But with this listening project, we began to invite in people from other communities, all within Duplin County. Everybody was telling similar stories. And I mean, that really hit me hard, because now I'm saying, what can we do? Because it's not just enough to hear the stories, but someone has to begin to take actions.
Did you identify as a community organizer? And like in that way that you do now in your work when you started REACH? Or is that something you started to identify in?
I did identify as a community organizer because I wanted to know. At that time, the executive director was the Thula Barron, my wife. Actually, she's co-founder as well. And I just wanted to know and see. She was originally from Winston-Salem. Mm-hmm. So I'm saying this is home to me. Mm-hmm. And if no one else, is wanting to address this issue and help find some solutions, then why not me? And, as I prayed about it, sometimes we look out and we're saying, well, why don't someone do this? Why don't someone do that? And, the question came back to me, through prayer. Well, why not you? Mm. And that's become my life. Mm. I mean, I wake up and I want to find answers, solutions to the problems, that's in Dupont County. Yeah. I go to bed at night and that's on my mind, how can we fix this? And I recognize that there is no easy fix. Mm. And also realize that it took years, for the industry to, get itself rooted in our communities. And it's gonna take years for us to, make some changes. In 2014, REACH, along with two other groups, Water Keepers Alliance and the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, filed a Title VI complaint against DEQ.
What's DEQ?
DEQ is Division of Environmental Quality.
Okay. Yeah.
So, and in that complaint, what we was saying was those facilities was disproportionately placed in communities of color. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, the DEQ was getting ready to renew the permits of all those facilities without questions, without addressing concerns from the community, knowing that we've been talking about these issues, for at least since 2005.
And seeing that these massive factory farms are being sited and placed in
Yes.
communities of color in North Carolina.
Yes. That wasn't, didn't just stop there. We put together a delegation and went to DC. We talked with EPA, Office of Civil Rights, and they sent a delegation to Dupont County. And they reported back to DEQ, there's some problems. They interviewed, I think, around 66 individuals, and all the stories was pretty much the same. So in, I think, April of last year, we reached a settlement with DEQ. Of course, there's a whole lot of ask, a lot of things you ask for, you don't expect to get it, but at the same time, for small organizations like REACH and for the Dupont County community, it was a win.
That's a major win, yeah.
It's a win. And sometimes I recognize that we don't recognize when we do win because we want bigger things,
That's right.
Mr. Cooper, Larry Cooper, the REACH Administrative Director, he often states, you know what, we don't want to score a touchdown every play. Mm. If we can get enough first downs, we eventually get to the goal line.
There you go. I can understand that. Yeah.
So with that being said, we strive now to keep getting those first downs and try to keep the community informed and involved. And that's sometimes hard. That's sometimes a struggle because when you look at racism, the power structure in Dupont and surrounding counties were in North Carolina livestock production, swine. I mean, that's income, that's tax base, that's revenue. So the North Carolina General Assembly, they're in bed, that's the term we use, with big business. And a couple of years ago, they drafted and passed House Bill 467, I think that's what it was, to prevent individuals from suing the industry in the form of nuisance. I think later that year they also drafted and passed another bill, Senate Bill 7011.
Mm-hmm.
So, but anyway, all of that was designed to keep people of color, and that's what we believe, solid and not sue. You take away those things from people that feel that they've been stomped on and trashed, and in some cases has had animal waste sprayed on them, then what's the next recourse?
And Devon, you know, you're really talking about working on this edge of racial justice and in the environmental movement.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious if, as you're working in the environmental movement around the country, I mean, you travel all over the country, are you seeing the environmental movement understanding racial justice, understanding some of these lenses, or are you seeing that there are some blockages, and how do you handle that?
As I travel around the country, and when we just talk about racial justice, for the most part, many of the groups that I'm in workshop with, I don't think they get it.
Mm.
Some of our closest white allies don't really get it.
Mm. How do you know when someone doesn't get it?
Because there's times that, you know, they'll speak of having rallies, and I'm saying, okay, you want to have a rally in Dupont County, so you want to light a fuse to a bomb, and by the time you get back to, you know,
wherever city you're going back
to, the bomb is exploding here.
Because we live here.
Because we live here, and we see this every day. You know, when you hear stories of people being targeted as they go in stores and that they're being followed. When you hear stories of people driving down the highway, and if they're recognized, their car is recognized, someone is pulling into their lane as if to have a head on. When you see people showing up at your houses or at reach,
and this is what's
at
happening.
our office,
This is what's happening right now. Yeah.
When you see the industry prompting what they would call family farmers to put signs up in their yards and on the roadway, you know, no farm, no food, and, you know, as if we're trying to put people out of business. When you see that, then it's clear that some of our white allies don't really get it whenever they want to have meetings of some type, you know, some meetings in and around Dupont County, and expect people of color to turn out in numbers.
Right.
Because, see, people of color, yes, they can turn out, but then they got to get back home.
Mm-hmm.
And what will they be facing when they get back home? You know, that's the scary thing. And we had to realize that in the era or the time that we're living in now, where there's so much hatred being preached and allowed, you know, in this country. Yes, there are people that's afraid.
Yeah.
And so that makes my work, you know, a little bit difficult, because I'm trying to educate people. I'm trying to get people to feel some sense of empowerment, but at the same time, they're being hit on the other side with, you know, fear-mongering, you know.
Well, let me ask you, you know, there are so many communities around the country that are suffering from factory farms.
Yes.
and the environmental damage of factory farms. And other corporations, right? We may not have as many factory farms in Maine, and we still have environmental concerns and disproportionate impact of environmental ills against people of color. For communities that don't have a reach, what would you say to them? Or like, what do those communities need in this moment?
For communities that don't have a reach, somewhere, somehow, they have to, if they can, align themselves with other organizations that's doing similar work. And for those organizations that's looking for impact communities, you can't just parachute in as if you have all the answers. You really got to spend some time there. You've got to learn the people.
Get into the
I mean, because even the language, even though we may all speak English, but the language is still so different. I live in rural North Carolina, and the language is so different. If you ever hear someone say, use the term "hanging out clothes,"
yeah, I know.
you know, and when I was hanging out my clothes, they were sprayed on. Hard waste was sprayed on it. What do you mean hanging out your clothes? You know, they're saying, well, I was doing my laundry and I put my clothes outside on a clothesline to dry.
Yeah.
And again, I think also that groups that care about people that live in impact communities, if they want to help, I think they also need to look close at the resources they have that they could offer, the time that may be needed, because just to get funding for a project that's going to last, 1, 2, 3 years, that's not enough.
That's not enough.
That's not enough.
Well, what I love, what I hear you saying is, if you're working on racial justice in the environment, if you're working in real communities, at some level the answer is the same, where it has to start with relationship and love for the community itself. It can't be a process and a procedural answer, right? It's not just about the policy win. It's about how is the community being honored and respected on the ground. I really appreciate you sharing these stories with us. Thank you so much.
The other one thing that I would like to add is the model of the plan that you use in one area may not work when you go to a different area. And we learned that with another grant we received from EPA, a collaborative problem solving grant. And yes, they had their model. And we had to stand strong on and telling them that won't work in Duke County. So you had to take whatever model that you have and you had to tailor it to the community that you're working with.
And one of the first ways racial justice has to start is with listening and humility, right? I think sometimes in a moment, especially in the environmental movement, where so many things can be ruled by a sense of science or policy or kind of this knowledge that's very much important, but is a knowledge that's often seen as on high. Other knowledges aren't acknowledged and given that same due and that same respect.
I really, at REACH in 2007, I realized then that research and science would be a powerful tool for REACH. And so we partnered with UNC Chapel Hill, Johns Hopkins University, and that's been a large part of our work.
And that is a part of the racial justice work, right? It's not seeing these things as two separate knowledges, but access for everybody. Well, thank you. I really enjoyed speaking with you today. And you can check out all of our Brass Tacks videos at upwithcommunity.org.